Hey, what's up guys? In this video, I'm going to be introducing some new concepts pertaining to production in Ableton Live. I'm going to be picking up the pace a little bit more in these videos, and this video is called Auto Filter and Automation. We're going to be dealing with a lot of things in this video. So first thing is go into the pinned comment. There is a download link, and put that in the folder that we put folders into. And it is called Auto Filter and Automation, which is the name of this video. You open it up, and there are 4 things within. I want us to go into the arrangement view by hitting tab. This is the arrangement view, and I quickly want to delete these MIDI tracks by right-clicking and then hitting delete. I could also just select it and hit del on my computer typey keyboard thing. And I'm left with 2 audio tracks. That works out well. I'm going to select all of these and then bring them in, drag them in, and there they are. And they're red because of the track color is red. They're colored automatically. We can change the color if we want by right-clicking there. Lots of options. I want to spread these out a little bit more. So check this out. We're just going to see, like before, they were all kind of selected, and I can move them around like so. But I want to actually spread them out kind of evenly. And I'm going to go up here to the zoom and pan area, which is where my mouse is right now, right up here. And I can zoom and look at what I'm looking at. And this view up here, I can stretch it open. It gives us an overview of the entire track if we really want to see that. We can see everything in a larger context up there. So as I was dragging these things around, you may have noticed that they are kind of snapping to a grid, and that's how the grid settings kind of work in Ableton Live. Right now, the grid is set to adaptive. So there's a number down here. This is the number. Get that number. This is the number. It's 1/2. So what does that mean? That means that every single slice that we select here by holding and clicking our mouse and moving it around is half a bar, right? So if we do the math and we select 2, that's 1 bar. And if we have 2 of those, that's 2 bars. So these are 2-bar loops. This one in particular is 4, right? So we have different length of loops depending on what you're doing. This grid is adaptive. So what that means is as you zoom, look down here, that number will change, right? The divisions will change. Right now, every slice we select is a 16th, right? We zoom in even more by clicking and holding and dragging down. It gets to a really small number. Like, and then it gets to like so small we can't even see what's going on here, like the plank length or whatever. Just joking. So that's how the adaptive grid works. When we zoom out all the way, in our case, it's set to 1/1. So that means every single kind of grid that we see is 1 bar, which is very useful. So it gives us this awesome kind of frame of reference. It's adaptive. So if we right-click anywhere in this area, and anywhere within the clip, I did that by right-clicking. We have a grid here, and I'll just get rid of my dumb face. We have a grid division here and a grid division here. So right here, every area that I select is a 16th, and I'll get rid of that. And every thing I select here is 1 bar, right? And these are completely independent of each other, right? You see this number moving around, and this number here, it's also moving around. And it's adaptive, so we can change it, actually. And I'll show you how that's done. Essentially, you click anywhere in here, and we right-click. Right now, these are the grid settings. So right now, it's set to adaptive grid narrow. We can have, narrowest, and we can have widest, right? So the grid has different divisions in terms of its wideness. But then we can get into the fixed grid, which is also very useful for people starting out. If we're getting into the arrangement and we're having trouble kind of figuring out like where things are, where things should be, right? We can select one bar, and that means that no matter where we're zooming, how we're zooming, every section that we select is one bar. And we can do some really simple math here. So what makes it so cool is that, there's different shades of gray as we go along. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that'd be four bars within this grade area, and then 4 here, so that'd be 8, right? And then we select here 16, right? So we can do our arrangement that way, and we can easily see and kind of figure out what's going on for arrangement, because arrangements are, 13, not 13, 8, 16, 32, depending on, what you're doing. Sometimes even a half and whatnot. And we'll get into weird arrangements down the line probably. So that's the adaptive grid, and it's important to wrap your head around that because it's just super useful. So I'm going to set it back to narrow, which is its default, and yeah, I'm going to look at some situations here. I want to drop in a auto filter. So I'm going to go to audio effects, and then these are in alphabetical order. Auto filter's right there. And this is a really cool effect. It's really basic and it is very usable, but we're introducing some concepts pertaining to music production with this thing. So I'm gonna select it and delete it with delete. I'm gonna do that again because I just did it automatically. You can take the auto filter and drag it into any kind of track lane, no matter where it is, and it will appear in the device view here. Let's hit tab and go to session, and we'll notice that one audio doesn't have anything, and then two, the one that's called 2 synth, that is automatically renamed, has the auto filter in it, right? So, how that works is, yeah, you just drag and drop it in. Also, I'll delete it, go back to arrangement, and I'll select synth. I can just select synth and then double click on it, double click on auto filter up here, and it will appear down there. So it's very easy. You can either double click or drag and drop, and that might be useful because you might want to drag in another effect before this one, after this one, things like that. So let's get busy. Let us rearrange these a little bit, right? So I'm just rearranging things, dragging things around, and I have a sweep here. And I have it, I select the name part when I move things around. I'm going to select it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit spacebar. Right? And it plays, which is pretty neat. And it plays because, I can click here to set the play start time anywhere that I want and hit the spacebar, and it will play there. This might be kind of jarring, actually. There's a follow option in live where the playhead always stays in the middle. That might actually confuse some people. So I'm going to go up to this option up here, and this is the follow option. So what it says down there in the info view is, if activated, display will scroll during playback and keep the current song position visible. Let's not do that. Let's just toggle that off. And now when we hit play, we can actually, have context and we'll jump around. So that would be what passes as a white noise sweep. It's kind of stepped, but whatever. Let's do some workflow things. So I remember, I think it was in one of the earlier videos, said that there's multiple ways to go about doing things in Ableton Live. Some are easy, some are kind of complicated. Like for example, this loop section up here, having a start and an end point and all that fun stuff, it's kind of like confusing for a loop area. I want to loop this sweep sound here. What you can do is you can actually just select it, right click, and then go down to loop selection, and it'll automatically select a loop and loop it. So now this will be looped if I hit play. right? And that's a sweep, and it's looping, and it'll loop forever. And these are the loop markers up here. This is loop in and loop out. And we can right-click up here. Loop is toggled. We can toggle it off. We can right-click and toggle it on, make the loop shorter, longer. Or, we can do it up here and, move some stuff. But that's like, why would you do that when you have, this awesome thing right here that you can move around and select different loop points? Like if I wanted to loop these drums we're going to be looking at soon, I can do that. And you can't hear them, and I did that purposefully because, they're really low in volume. I'm going to actually do something about that very soon when we get there. So let's go back over to our sweep. And the sweep is here to kind of demonstrate how frequency works in the audio realm and what filters do. All right, so I'm going to take this filter here and leave it. I'm confirming that I'm in this channel here. I have it selected. I'm going to go into another audio effect and then go into spectrum. I'm going to drag spectrum in, and I can drag it like that. I'll delete it, or I could just double click and it'll appear. So a spectrum is a time domain visualizer. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about some science somewhat. So we have multiple ways to look at audio. One of the two major ways is in two kind of different dimensions. We can look at audio in the time domain, and we can look at audio in the frequency domain. These are two entirely different domains. The time domain, and I'm just going to drag this and open it, right? I can drag it and open it like that, which is pretty cool, and then select up here to zoom in to this thing in question. And then I can continue to zoom in, and look at that. Look at those squiggly lines, right? Look at those. That is a time domain representation of a sound, right? And as this moves up in frequency, we can see up here in the time domain, you probably got distracted by that spectrum, I did too. The spaces get more and more tighter and more and more put together. And now we're in like how looking at a hint of how sampling works, right? These are getting more and more put together. And when waves get more and more compressed and put together, the pitch goes up. And that is what this is demonstrating, right? So let me double click to collapse the spectrum for now. Let's just look at this. And, low frequencies here. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to show you something within the clip. I'm going to double click on this clip because I actually want to make it a little bit more louder. It's low in volume. A lot of things in this are low in volume. I don't want to boost the volume in the fader. I want to do it in the clip. So let me go into the clip view here, and there is this gain slider. I'm going to actually increase the gain of this, and I will be able to see better what's going on here. And it's going to be a little bit louder, but it'll be close to unity, which is valuable. Right? So as things get more and more compressed, the frequency goes up. But it's hard to kind of see and like notice this when you're looking at it in time domain. Right? Time domain is essentially, looking at it through time. Like we can see, okay, it's changing in time, right? Blah, blah, blah. If we want to look at it in the frequency domain, we use something called a spectrum. And this will show us what the frequency is doing, the spectrum over the scale of human hearing, which is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So the spectrum is going to require a little bit of setup. Actually, no, I'm not going to set it up. I'm just going to double click on it, and it will expand and do that. So let's look at this sweep here. I'm going to zoom out, and let's play it. Isn't that neat? So what's happening there is this spectrum analyzer represents frequency. Things on the low end on the left side are low frequencies, and on the top are higher frequencies. And then beyond here, like, dog whistles and stuff like that. So let me get rid of max there. I want to actually draw on this. You know what? I've worked hard and I deserve to be able to draw. So to understand the spectrum here, so actually, hold your horses. We've already done this. Let's go into options. Remember the first thing that we did? Let's go into options and then go into preferences, and then we'll go into audio, right? Test tone. Let's play a test tone. It's not going to show up in here, but I can demonstrate what's going on. Frequencies are like cycles per second. So like a really fast, like tight together wave of energy is a higher frequency, and then ones that are more far apart are lower frequencies. And we can actually do a sweep with this. Check this out. Right? So right now it's 440, right? This tone frequency allows us to change the hertz of the whole thing. Let's turn the test tone on and I'll bring it down. Right? And that's like 96 hertz. And I can bring it up all the way to like the limits. Right? That is the relationship of frequency in terms of a tone, right? And that's a sine wave and it's a pure and clean tone, but it gives you the idea that there's pitch. So this is a pitch sweep, and these like the spectrum kind of readout. So the I guess you'd call it the horizontal aspect of the whole thing. This part from here to here would be amplitude or loudness. Well, let's say amplitude, right? This would be, no. I gotta do this. Right, amplitude, right? And it's in a dB scale, right? So it's a scale that pertains more to our hearing, right? So it's dB, right? So, it can be a number of things. No, I'm not going to do that. It's confusing. So the relative scale is between, I guess, 0 and all the way down to the noise floor, wherever that is, right? Way down there, right? And we can actually see it if we turn off the auto scaling feature of this thing, because that's also going to confuse people. So I'm just changing the range. Don't be alarmed here. So this is the amplitude range of the whole thing, and 0 is unity, right? So it's a relative scale. So 0 is unity. So as we sweep, this way, and I'll call this something right over here. This scale would be, this would be frequency, right? So we got amplitude and we got frequency, right? This there, that there, and then the amplitude up above, that, and then that, right? So keep note of like where 0 is. 0 is very important. So on this readout, we got amplitude, we got frequency. So if we play this, we will actually see a representation of what's happening as we move up and down the frequency. Right? And that's really cool. So what does this all mean? What's really important to know is that sound is, like, songs are made up of all of these frequencies that we're looking at right here. And when we add in effects, we are affecting the frequency and time domain content of whatever we're affecting. And things become more visible in the frequency domain as opposed to the time domain, and vice versa, right? And the frequency domain is logarithmic, right? So it's not linear, right? So right here is 100 hertz, right? And right here is 1K, which would be 1,000 hertz, right? Because we abbreviate things. And up here is 10,000 hertz. So it's kind of not matching up in terms of its scale. It just doesn't make any sense. It's logarithmic, very important. See, right here is 10,000 hertz, or 10K. So a K is 1,000, so 10K would be 10,000, right? And this is a logarithmic frequency scale, which is better suited to what our ears are actually attuned to hearing, right? Right. So from 10,000 right up here is 20,000, by the way. I should also mention that. Like the max is 20,000. Which is like the limit. So up here would be, 20K, right? 20K, I can't even go up that high. That's over there. And then down here would be 20, right? This would be 20, right? So hopefully that makes sense there. It's a logarithmic scale. So when you're looking at analysis tools like this, be wary of whether it's linear, logarithmic, what kind of weighting it has. Loudness weighting is very important in terms like how they measure things in audio different than in another kind of scientific measurement world, because they're calibrated to be more appropriate to what we can actually hear. So when we're looking at this spectrum, and when we're mixing a track or whatever, we're very sensitive between 1K and 10K. We're around 4K. Each one of these bins, we can see down here, right? Keep your eye down there. I don't know if you can see it. I'll actually erase that guy there because we get the idea. If we mouse over, we will actually see that this is 4K, right? Down there in the lower left, 4K, and this is 5K, 6, 7, then they get more and more compressed. It's a different scale. If I were to change it to a linear, it's, set up that way. Things have kind of changed and things are more linear. So each one of these, this is 5K, 10K, 15, 20, you know what I mean? Very linear. I'm going to set it to log and get out of that. So it's really important that we establish these things early on and stuff like that. So when I said that these devices and effects affect the time domain and frequency domain, they affect the audio, and things become more apparent when you're looking at the time domain, and they become more apparent when you're looking at the frequency domain, vice versa. We're going to look at the filter here. So this is the sweep here. Right? So it goes past something, 1K, 1,000 hertz in terms of that pitch. We're going to look at this filter here. So this is an auto filter, and it's an elementary piece of electronics. Filters have been around for a while. I would say. There's a resistor capacitor, there's ladder transistor, there's all sorts of different filters, there's DSP. You'll notice that this has a spectrum readout as well. See, I was getting somewhere. 100, 1K, 10K. Let's take this little yellow selection guy and move it here. What would happen if we bring this to 1K? Let's play this again. Well, what happened there? It got quieter when it went past that frequency. This is a filter. It filters out high frequencies. This is a low-pass filter, right? There's many different kinds of filters. I hope we can get into all of them by the end of this video, but this is a low-pass filter, and I'm going to demonstrate it with some noise. Now, I'm going to warn you, it might be a little bit annoying. I'm going to set this back to up there. All right, so the sweep was just, one tone going up the spectrum. Noise is essentially noise, and it fills up the whole spectrum. So noise, in this case, is very useful to see what the filter is doing. So a filter has a cutoff frequency, right? And that is displayed right here. So we're going to be looking at two important aspects of a filter, right? There's the cutoff frequency. And let's bring this cutoff frequency to, let's do, 1 point, no, you know what? Yeah, let's do something obvious, very obvious. We'll do 1.16K, okay? So we're doing 1.16K, and if we look at the white noise again, it's rolled off. Not completely. So let's discuss this a bit more. Let's just compare it on and off. And how you do that is you disable and re-enable a plugin with this device activator switch here. We can turn it on and off, and we can see and hear the effect that we've been doing. Right? Very neat. So how a filter works is there is a cutoff point, and let's just pretend that it's at 1K. I'm going to get my trusty pen out here. So this right here, 1K, this would be the cutoff point. This is where the filter becomes activated on the frequency spectrum. Okay, and this is set by this number right here. And there are many different kinds of filter cutoffs. And what's happening after the cutoff point is the roll-off. And there's different kinds of steepnesses of roll-offs. And I'm going to get into more advanced filter things as we go along. So let's give that a look and a listen, and I'll just leave max on, and I'll do that. Okay, so there's a ghost image of the cutoff point here. So this is the cutoff point, and let's just kind of do that. So we can compare it, right? Very interesting cutoff right there. Let's set this to a different cutoff. How you do that is you select the slope of the filter. So right now it's set to 24. Let's toggle it to 12 and look at the difference. Right? Completely different filter, and you get the idea. Right, I can just kind of do that, and oh man, right. So the different cutoffs have different slopes and intensities of that cutoff point. We can go really crazy with filters, especially in the modern realm. We can have like complete cut brick wall, crazy filters that wasn't very straight, and like ripple ones that don't, But let's just focus on these two. So what dictates the power of the filter after the cutoff point would be its kind of slope. And these numbers are interchangeable with another number. 12 means 12 dB per octave, right? So every octave or a decade, it is reduced 12 dB, right? So this one would be obviously, if we're all keeping track, this one would be the 12 dB per octave, right? And then this one right here would be the 24 dB per oct. I'll just say oct, right? Or you can put a slash there if you want to be cool. And these are the filter cutoff intensities. There's a number of different filters that do a little bit less, a little bit more. I'm not going to get into poles quite yet. Poles can be described in this, but they're in order of either 12 or 6. There's 6 dB per octave, which is a gentle roll off, which I really enjoy, and then there's 48 dB per octave, which is kind of down there, and there's just really surgical EQ kind of stuff. I don't want to get too much ahead of myself, but yeah, hopefully I'm not going a little too crazy here. But that's what a filter is essentially doing, is when you select a frequency cutoff point of the filter, it will roll off frequency content above that. And the amount that it rolls off depends on the slope or dB per octave setting of what's going on. So we have our cutoff point, and we have the ability to give that filter a bit of resonance. Now, resonance is very important because it accents that cutoff point, and it makes it sound cool, for lack of a better term. So let's demonstrate what that does. So keep your eye on this 10K area, and you'll notice something happening. Right? It boosts it. It accentuates the cutoff point. It doesn't change the slope behavior, but it does something neat. And with that, we have a somewhat of a grasp of what a filter will achieve. It will accentuate, and it will accentuate the cutoff frequency and then filter off other things above that. So what can you do with this? Well, we can do a bunch of stuff. Let's move on to, actually, let's just do some other kinds of filters really quickly, because I think the concept is fresh and it's going to translate well. We have resonance and we have cutoff, frequency. I guess the cutoff. We can select where the cutoff is, and we can move these around. Right, that would be a sweep, and it sounds really pleasing on white noise. Right, and it almost sounds tonal. We are shaping the sound with filters, which is something we're going to do with synthesizers in a little bit. That's all well and good. There's different kinds of filters as well. There's the inverse, where it filters everything below a certain frequency. And I can move the frequency like this and the resonance like this, or I can use something called an XY controller built into this, and I can move them both at the same time. Right now we're getting into really neat high pass filters. So right, there's low pass, right? Pass is the low, and then high pass passes the highs. Don't call them low cut or high cut. That is reserved for EQing and shaping, and it'll just kind of confuse you. Call it kind of what it is, which is a high pass. So if you combine a high pass and a low pass, you get a band pass, and it looks like so, right? So we're just selecting the filter types here. Right, that's a high pass and a low pass at the same time, and we can really boost the resonance here, and the shape of the band pass will change with our slope, so we can move things around like so. Right, make it more gentle and make it more extreme. I'm going to go back to low pass here, and we're going to get into all the other stuff later, state variable and filter emulations. Those are very much worthwhile, but I really would like to move on because I hope I haven't lost you. So we're going to get rid of the spectrum. We're just going to tuck it down there. We're going to use the filter in a practical way. So I've moved the loop selector to the drums. this drum area here. And I'm going to hit play with the filter open. So when the filter is all the way up, the low pass in this case is all the way up, and the resonance is normal. We can just double click any knob and it'll go back to normal. When the filter is open, I'm going to hit play. And you notice that it's quiet. Well, let's go back into this clip here by double clicking. And we'll notice that down here is the gain. And I'm going to reference this, and I'm going to boost the volume there. I'm actually going to play it and boost it and get it to a comfortable volume. All right. I'm actually going to, should I? Yeah, okay. I'm going to introduce another thing that we can do to these drums. I'm actually going to pitch them down using the Transpose knob here while it's playing. All right, that works for me. Okay, so we have these drums here. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to go back to the track and audio effect view here. I'm going to apply the auto filter to this. Right? So, sounds like drums occupy a lot of the spectrum. The low end kick drum, the high end of the hi-hats. It fills up the frequency space, so a filter on this makes a lot of sense. Notice how we're shaping it? Right? It works super well. And let's get into some basic modulation of this. You know how I'm moving this around? Right? And, wouldn't it be great if there was a thing that would kind of move that for me over time and, would modulate it? Well, there's actually a section for that built in. It is this LFO sample and hold section. I think it's called the modulation section. What it's going to do when I increase the amount is it's going to move this back and forth, right? And it's going to sound really neat. So I'm going to increase the amount here. Right now it's very slow. I can actually speed it up. The rate, right now it's 0.11 hertz. So, if I have that set to, 0.10 hertz, that's, very slow. Math. If I set it to, a faster speed, right? Every cycle of that modulation wave, which is dictated by a sine wave, and I'm going to get into modulation more in depth later. Don't worry about other things. There's just amount and then speed. It's going to be very apparent if I select bandpass here and then boost that resonance. Right? So you can kind of visually see it in your mind's eye moving around. It's not actually moving around, it's happening behind the scenes. It's not moving around visually, it's happening behind the scenes, but it's giving you the ability to modulate that by itself, really. What if we wanted to kind of move it manually, or what if we wanted to control every single movement manually? I'm going to set these back down to 0 or double click them to set them back to normal. We're going to get into automation, right? And let's go about doing that in this one here. So this is a little synth line that I made for the sake of example. We're going to make the filter open. I'm going to sweep it down. right? And let's say I wanted to like have that moving, have it opening, and have it kind of flowing, but I wanted to actually draw it in. We can do that, and we are going to do it with automation. So there's a bunch of different ways to go about it. Well, there's one way to go about it, but there's different ways to like get the menu open. So let's say we have this frequency sweeping thing here, which is like a one knob effect. If I want to automate that, and when I say automate, I mean I want to draw in movements over time in this timeline here in the session view, in the arrangement view. I can actually right click on it and I can go show automation. Kaboom. And this goes in a brand new mode in what you're looking at. And we see this line here. And this line is giving us, if we hover over it, it's giving us a value, and that's 552 hertz. And that's funny because this is 552 hertz. That's because this is the value of that control being represented in this timeline. So when we look at it, we can actually click anywhere on this line and it will create a point. And then we can click on another part of this line and it'll create another point. And what we can do is we can select these points and move them up or down in the timeline and do some things, like that. You notice that moved. That's pretty cool. We'll actually select this and we'll just hit play. Whoa, it's doing a thing, which is pretty interesting. So let's go about doing this another way. I'm going to right click and delete automation and just don't look at that. So I want to start automating some parameters. There's a 1.5 million ways to go about doing things in Ableton Live. Up here, these are the automation controls. This one right here is very important. Automation used to be built in. Well, it used to be always as an overlay in Live 9 and the previous versions. And that got to be kind of a pain because there was a line here you'd want to move something and then you'd accidentally grab the line and then your modulation and automation would go out of whack. I use the words modulation and automation interchangeably. So they've effectively buried it. They didn't bury it. It's like it's there when you need it and only when you need it. And people didn't like it, but I actually have grown to enjoy it and it makes a lot more sense. So we'll click on this button here. Kaboom. And you'll notice that the synth name and color things will actually change, and it will give us a representation of all of the things that we can automate in drop-downs. So the first drop-down would be the category, right? So I'll click on this to highlight the effects that we have in there. We have auto filter, and then we have spectrum. We can automate things in the spectrum. Spectrum isn't really an effect, but we can turn it on and off for some reason. Let's go back up into auto filter. And frequency is already selected because it will select automatically the last thing that you pressed. So right now it's frequency. If I click on resonance, it switches to resonance. I can also get a drop down, and I can modulate and automate, any of these values over time. So let us do that. I want to go to frequency. It's just a different way of going about it. And I can draw in more stuff. I can draw it in kind of more proficiently than the average bear. And let's listen to this. Right? I can be like, okay, that automation's kind of whatever. I want to make it a little bit more exciting. I'm going to select all of it, right click, and then clear envelope. Right? So it's effectively cleared that part of it. I'm going to zoom in here, and I want to set my grid size to this section right here, which is, I can visually see that is a note there. So now each grid is where a new note is selected. I'm going to hit B, to get my pencil tool out, and this will allow me, if I just click and hold, I can actually drag some wacky stuff in and out of there. Well, you can see that, and now it's more stepped. Right? We can get into stuff with that, and that is basic automation of the filter cutoff. It doesn't change when we select a new filter or a new filter type, right? And we can have the LFO modulation amount mapped and have it in conjunction with this automation. Oh, but looky here, I moved this amount here, and it is displayed over here in terms of the LFO amount. So I can actually move that value. I can see it in a readout up here, so I can draw in that. So we can automate modulators, which are in terms modulating something else. So it gets really cool, like really quickly. And we can see these things moving here, which is really nice. And this is independent of the clip. We're going to get into clip modulation soon. And if we wanted to actually go back and look at the things that we modulated, we can actually go up into here, select auto filter. We have the LFO amount right here, and then the frequency here. They're highlighted in red saying, hey, these are automated. And yeah, like I said, these are independent of the, I'll turn off my pencil tool. These are independent of the clip in question. So you can have, the clip kind of copied and moved around, and you can like have different automation for different clips and areas. So it gets really neat really quickly. So that is that. Automation, changing a value over time within the arrangement view. And we're just working with a filter, which is your first effect. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope I didn't get too much in depth, but I'm sure it would have helped me to understand that starting out. So that's why I really wanted to explain that. So I hope you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.